Hello everybody, I'm Mortika Lacrosse, and it's time for another Strange People in History. That's right, let's jump into it.
Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in to another Strange Person in History video. And in this particular video, well, let me put it this way. Have you ever known anyone that's like wanted to pretend to be 19 again, or wish they were 19 again? Or somebody who, just fakes their age a little bit, instead of like being 35, they're like, oh, I'm only 29. But in reality, you know that they're not. Well, this particular video is actually about a person who pretended to be 18 or 17, I can't remember. But they pretended to be a teenager for over 30 years. This is about Treva Throneberry. So let's just jump right into the video. I'm Mortika Lacrosse, and this is Strange People in History. So this particular story I found in the March 2002 issue of Texas Monthly. I'll leave the link to the article that you can find online. I particularly found it in the actual magazine as I was cleaning out one of the houses. As I've told you all before in a previous video, which I'll leave in the description bar down below, that I occasionally clean out abandoned houses so they can be demolished, and so the property, some of the stuff that's left behind can actually be returned to its owner. Of course, nobody claimed the magazine, so I was curious and I read the article, and it was, like I said, in the March 2002 issue of Texas Monthly. So let's get right to the video and cut to the chase. So in the mid-'80s, this cheerful high school student vanished. After more than a decade had passed, her friends and family in her tiny North Texas hometown of Electra had no idea where she was, or if she was dead or alive. They certainly didn't know that almost 2,000 miles away, her fate was kept secret by a teenage girl named Brianna Stewart. Now you're probably like, well, hey Mordecai, why was her secret that? Let's held by this chick named Brianna Stewart. We're gonna get to that. So she was the kind of girl that said yes ma'am, no ma'am, and all that kind of stuff. It was very polite. Worked as a waitress at a local place called the Whistle Stop. It was a hamburger kind of restaurant where she would go out to the trucks, kind of like similar to Sonic. Her name was Treva Throneberry, and just about everybody in the in that town, North Texas oil town, knew her by sight. She was never unhappy, people said. She never complained. She always greeted her customers with a shy smile, even when she had to walk out to their cars in winter. There were times, though, that the townspeople would say that they did wonder about the girl. No one had actually seen her do anything crazy or anything like that. They just said that sometimes her behavior just seemed suspicious. In fact, a pastor at the church she went to said at one point she stumbled upon her knees at church and told, Jesus that she deserved to not live. And there was one time where her young niece had said that while she was staying at the Throneberry home, that Trevor had shaken her awake the previous night and whispered that a man was outside their room with a gun, which turned not to be true at all. But surely everyone in town said that all teenage girls go through phases, and they thought that she just was going through a phase, that she was going to turn out fine. She didn't drink or smoke cigarettes or do drugs or like anything else like that. But then that December, just Electric High School Tigers were headed toward their first state championship. The town was feeling a rare surge of pride. Trevor, who was 16 years old at the time, stopped working at the Whistle Stop. She stopped coming to school. She disappeared, and nobody knew where she went. She just vanished. Then, about a decade later in 1997, a new girl arrived at this Evergreen High School wearing loose bib overalls, a t-shirt, and tennis shoes, and her hair was braided in pigtails. She was fuller figured than most teenage girls, white-hipped, and she had an appealing, slightly lopsided smile and a childlike voice that tinged with a southern drawl, and she was always carrying a graphite tennis racket and a Bible. Her name, she told school officials, was Brianna Stewart. She was 16 years old. She had said for almost a year she had been living in Portland, Oregon, just across the Columbia River from Vancouver, walking the streets during the day, sleeping in grim shelters at night. She started attending services at Vancouver's Charismatic Glad Tidings Church, where she met a young couple who took her into their home after hearing her testimony. They accompanied her to school and believed she was full of potential and determined to succeed. When asked about her past, she didn't say much. All she said that she was raised just outside Mobile, Alabama, by her mother and her Navajo stepfather, a sheriff's deputy. She said that she was a child and her mother had been murdered, and after that she lived with her stepfather. At the age of 13, she ran away and hitchhiking from state to state because Brianna remembered her mother telling her that her real father lived in the Northwest, and she'd come to the area hoping she would find clues to her past. It's about to get more interesting, folks. So it was the most unusual case that Merrill had heard in his 30 years of counseling students. When he asked her about her education, she told him she had only been homeschooled but had promised she would be a good student. She said that she never had an arm and knife, and that's all she wanted to be, a normal teenager. She was enrolled in 10th grade at the 1,900 student school. One of her first classes was Algebra 1. She walked in, was given a seat toward the back, where she pulled out a notebook and began listening intently to the teacher. Then she glanced at the boy sitting next to her, Ken Dunn, and at one point they began dating. Now, back in the 80s, though, it didn't take long for the rumor to spread that she had been seen at the police station, that she had made a claim that her daddy had held a gun at her point and had raped her, and all this other stuff. Now, it was found out later for this Treva Throneberry, this is not Brianna Stewart, we're talking about Treva Throneberry again, that his older brother Billy, who had stayed with them, had supposedly raped her. Now, there was evidence that later on, not that long after his death, that yes, he had raped the other girls and her as well, but later on, as they married, they just never spoke about it. But before she had disappeared, Treva Throneberry had told a story about how she'd been kidnapped in Electra, taken blindfold by members of a satanic cult to an abandoned oil field where she was tied to a stake, and people in black robes danced around her, and she said they had slit the throats of the black cats and dogs and forced her to drink their blood. In '86, she went to see the counselor at Wichita Falls High School and said in an eerie, calming voice that she was thinking about jumping off the floor building to kill herself. Police officers sped to the school, handcuffed Treva, and drove her to the old red brick Wichita State Fall Hospital at the edge of the city. She spent long times in there, and they could not confirm her story. In fact, most of the time, they found out that her story was completely made up, and they prescribed her Xanax, and this was right before she disappeared. And so Treva Throneberry disappeared. And about several years later, a girl named Brianna Stewart showed up at the particular school with textbooks and a Bible, and she was able to quote entire passages of Macbeth from memory, the Shakespeare play the sophomore class was required to read. Extra credit, she wrote poems and stories, including one about a little girl who had only imaginary friends as playmates. Almost every day she came to the school in the same outfits: overall, a t-shirt and tennis shoes, pigtails, a serious teenage fashion faux pas. One afternoon, a classmate named Shan McKay asked her if she would like to go to the mall with a group of other girls. But then this is where it started to go seem a little off. She was able to quote stuff, right? And her stories started to not add up as they investigated. And at one point, when they started to do the background research on her, at one point her mouth was hurting, so they took her to the dentist, and the way the wisdom teeth were impacted would mean that only of a person in their 20s or 30s could have their wisdom teeth impacted like that. And as they looked into the background, they found out that a truck driver she accused of rape supposedly raped her. Come to find out that wasn't true. And here's where the story gets interesting. As they did the background research on her, they found out she'd went by very many aliases throughout the country and had been doing this since the 80s, and that in fact she was not at all in her teens. She was in fact a 30-year-old woman named Treva Throneberry. See, the thing is as they did the research, a police detective from Daphne spent several days driving her around, hoping she would get something to jog her memory. But one possible clue came when she visited the dentist, like I said. And the thing is the dentist later told a social worker that he was surprised to notice that Brianna's wisdom teeth had been extracted and the scars had healed. Highly unusual for a 16-year-old girl. When the social worker, Brianna, asked about the dentist's statement, she responded with this blistering 5-page, single-spaced letter criticizing those who doubt her story. But here's where it gets more interesting. As the more they did into the background, they started to realize that her accusations were groundless. One of the names she went by was Kelly Thornberry, and she reappeared in the summer of '94 in the town of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where she told people her name was Leanna Davis. She said her mother had been murdered by her father, a supposed police officer. Then she had told police and office workers in Plano that her name was Cara Williams, and that she was 16-year-old and she had been born and raised in a satanic cult where she had told her destiny was to honor Satan. Female detective was determined to discover who had harmed Carr that she had drove to Colleyville and asked the police chief if she knew any officer who might have had this special interest in satanic activities. And that's where it all went downhill. Social workers had shuttled her from various foster homes and youth shelters around the Dallas area trying to find a place where she could feel safe. Blah, 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 blah. Sorry. I'd already said this. But in September 1995, Arnold received a call at home from a staffer at residential treatment center where Carr was staying and said that Carr was actually a 26-year-old woman named Treva Throneberry. And so come to find out, she had been traveling throughout the country under various aliases. And here's some of the aliases she went by. So as the investigation continued, they found out she was Brianna Stewart, Stephanie Danielle Lewis, Emily Carr Williams, Kelly T. Thornberry Smith, Carolina Davis, Kelly Smith, Stephanie Williams, Emily Carr Williams, Carr Lewis. In June 2003, after serving 2 years and 3 months of her sentence, she was released from a Gig Harbor, Washington Correctional Institute. Come to find out, she was actually an American woman who spent most of her 20s pretending to be a teenager and engaging in other forms of con artistry. What she was convicted in prison of, she made numerous false claims of sexual abuse, claimed she was a victim of satanic ritual abuse to gain money. She traveled in the United States, residing in foster homes, colleges, and with any other family that would take her in, using false identities in order to scam the U.S. government and state governments out of millions and millions of dollars through social welfare programs. She was not at all who she said she was, and still to this day, she claims that she is Brianna Stewart, even though DNA evidence that later on was performed proved that she was actually Treva Joyce Thornberry, born May 18th, 1969, which makes her 50 years old now. Still to this day, she claims her innocence, even though she was put under psych evaluation and found out to be none other than a con artist, lying about who she was. So yeah, this is the strange people in history, a person that claimed various identities, scamming tons of people, showing no remorse for her actions at all. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be notified of future strange people in history videos. Thank you for watching this video. Oh, and yeah, did you notice my new mic right here? My new mic that I recently got from wish.com. And so yeah, I got a new mic setup and headphones. And so this is my new setup. Hopefully at one point I'll have an actual studio setup, more professional looking than this. Anyways, thank you for watching. As always, stay strange.
If you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can see future strange people in history videos. As always, until next time, stay strange.